Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the chaos of revolutionary France, a world of liberty, equality, and terror, where everyday life meant marching under new flags and risking your neck at the guillotine. You've seen the dramatic speeches and storming of the Bastille, but what about the shopkeeper forced to hand over his last loaf, or the soldier shivering in muddy camps? Tonight we ask what it would take to survive a single day amid the fever of revolution where paper money was worthless and suspicion was a weapon. Let us know where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. Now dim the lights and let the echoes of drums and mob cries guide our journey into revolutionary France. You bolt upright in your narrow straw-filled bed as the world shakes around you. The shutters bang against their frames and splinters fly off the windowsill. Cannon fire echoes through every floor of your tiny apartment under the steep roof tiles. You slam your foot against the floorboards to steady yourself and nearly tumble over the remains of last night's candle lantern, its glass globe cracked and coated in soot. Gasping, you shove aside your thin wool blanket and scramble to your feet. Your heart hammers like a drum calling troops to battle. The dawn light that filters through the smudged window panes is already pale and grey. You wipe sweat and soot from your brow, taste grit on your tongue, and realize the day has begun with its own kind of terror. You fling open the door into the cramped hallway, nearly colliding with a neighbor whose powdered wig hangs lopsided from the cannon blast. She gives you a hurried nod and a shaky smile before darting down the stairs toward the street below. You follow, your boots thudding against the wooden treads, each step sounding like distant hoofbeats racing toward the Bastille. At the bottom of the stairwell you find the narrow lane already clogged with frantic townspeople. The smell of burning coal and spilled wine mixes with sweat and fear. A baker hauls his bread cart backward, loaves tumbling onto the cobbles, crust cracking on impact. He shouts for help, and two soldiers, redcoats exchanged for tricolour cockades, frog-march him aside. Cries of outrage and confusion rise around you like a tide. You duck under an overturned cart where a stray dog whimpers and scurries off, tail between its legs. You climb over the splintered wood and land on your feet in a puddle of muddy water and fragments of yesterday's meal. Someone nearby trips and apologizes with a curse. You pause to wipe the mud from your gloves, aware that each soaked thread will cling to your skin all day. Ahead you see a group of women linking arms. Their skirts billow around them as they move in unison, chanting songlines from the old church hymns remixed into calls for liberté and fraternité. Their voices crack with emotion, yet rise above the chaos. You feel a spark of something warm amid the fear. The revolution has always been as much about hope as it is about terror. You push forward past the chanting circle and find yourself in front of the public fountain you used each morning to fetch your water jug. The basin is bone dry and cracked. No water and no comfort. Instead, there is a makeshift notice pinned to the stone with a crudely scrawled message announcing that supplies have been commandeered for the army. You trace the ink with your fingertip and taste copper on your glove. Without water, there are no cleansed hands, no ready coffee, no small comforts to steel you against the storm. Your stomach growls in protest. You remember the half loaf of bread tucked in your coat pocket. You pat the pocket and realize it is gone, probably snatched up by a street urchin eager for a scrap. You shrug it off and press on, reminding yourself that hunger sharpens the mind and humble beginnings build resilient hearts. As you round a corner, you almost run into a pair of National Guardsmen marching in stiff formation. Musket barrels glint in the early light. Their faces are impassive under tricorn hats, but their eyes flick toward every window and doorway, searching for threats or traitors. You catch one man's gaze and muster a weak salute. He nods once, the barest acknowledgement of your presence in his world now ruled by battalions rather than parishes. You slip past them into a quieter side street where you spot a small cafe half open. The sign hangs crooked from a single nail. Inside you see chairs tipped over, a single table with 2 cups of cold coffee left untouched, and crumbs of yesterday's cassis-flavored pastry scattered on the floor. One patron sits in the corner, clutching his head, eyes closed, as if the noise has driven him mad. You hesitate, then step inside. The baker's wife behind the counter, glances at you with tired eyes, but offers a forced smile. She hands you a cup of the thinnest coffee you have ever tasted. It smells of scorched barley and watered-down beans, but it is warm, and it is yours. You press a few copper coins into her trembling hand and lift the cup to your lips. The liquid slides down your throat, like a promise that comfort can still be found even here. You lean against the chipped blue counter and watch through the cafe window as the street beyond teems with bodies. Men in ragged coats jostle with tradesmen in fine suits. A group of children balance on a broken barrel, playing war with sticks while the real cannons boom overhead, their laughings brittle, yet bright. You realize that in the midst of upheaval there is still room for defiance and joy, however fleeting. You swallow the last of the coffee, place the empty cup on the counter, and push off. Outside, the cannon fire continues, but its terror is now tempered by the warmth in your chest. You tighten your cloak around your shoulders, step over the threshold, and rejoin the crowded streets. Your boots slap the cobblestones. Your heart still thrums with fear, but it also carries the spark of possibility. You may have woken to cannon blasts and a maze of panic, but you have also found small acts of courage and kindness that remind you why the old order is shaking. Each step forward may bring you danger, but it also brings you closer to the idea that a single day in revolutionary France can be survived, and maybe even lived. And so you press on into the dawn's uncertain light, ready for whatever comes next. You slip back into the swirl of bodies, the cafe's warmth already a distant memory. The narrow streets have become a river of motion and noise, people surging past like restless currents. Every footstep kicks up dust and grit that stings your eyes. You press your shoulder against a line of dockworkers hauling crates of confiscated grain, their faces grim but determined. A young woman hands out scraps of torn pamphlets. New laws, new rights, new tomorrow, written in jagged ink. You take one and tuck it into your coat, grateful for something to hold on to besides fear. A baker's apprentice rifles through a basket of bruised apples and offers you one for free. You hesitate, then accept. You bite into the flesh, and the tart juice runs down your chin. It is the first honest sweetness you've tasted this morning. The apprentice smiles and ducks away before you can thank him. In that moment, you realize that even amid chaos, small acts of kindness still find their way through. You round the corner onto Rue Saint-Antoine, and the crowd thickens until you can hardly see the cobbles beneath your boots. Revolutionary cockades bob on every hat, red, white, and blue rosettes pinned to collars and lapels like badges of courage. You catch sight of a group of sans-culottes drilling with wooden muskets under the watchful eye of a volunteer officer. Their makeshift uniforms are mismatched, but their stance is proud. You stop to watch as they shoulder arms and march in place, the clop 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 of their boots echoing through the narrow canyon of buildings. Beyond them, a cluster of seamstresses has claimed a shuttered doorway as a de facto meeting hall. They clutch bundles of reclaimed silk and wool, whispering about plans to sew new flags for the National Guard. One woman catches your eye and lifts a length of tricolour fabric for you to see. She smooths it across her palm as if testing its promise. You nod, and she presses it into your grasp for safekeeping. You tuck the flag into your coat beside the pamphlet, feeling your pockets grow heavier with revolution. You press on toward the Seine, hoping for a glimpse of the river's silver ribbon. When you arrive at the quay, you find the water too low to fill carts or wash clothes. The lavoir is dry, its stone basins cracked like parched lips, but a group of children has commandeered the empty troughs for an impromptu game of tag. Their laughter rings out, bright and defiant. One boy slips on the smooth stones and lands with a wet slap. Others roar with delight and leap in to join him. You smile despite yourself. A clang of bells draws your attention inland again. You follow the sound to a small plaza where a makeshift assembly has formed. Revolutionary songs are being sung in harmony. Men and women link arms and sway in a circle around a borrowed drum set on an overturned bucket. You step into the fringe of the crowd, and lift your voice off-key to join in. The lyrics speak of liberty and justice and a world remade from the ashes of monarchy. For one breathless moment, your heart lifts above the fear and hunger. As the song ends, the crowd breaks into applause. A burly cobbler presses a battered tricorn into your hand in thanks for your voice. You touch the felt rim and wonder if you might wear it one day as a symbol rather than a relic. The cobbler winks and returns to his station, tapping out new orders to the workers who repair confiscated boots for the militia. You watch as he stitches a red stripe down the leg of a heavy leather boot, a small but fierce declaration of solidarity. Your stomach twinges, and you remember the stolen loaf now sitting cold in your pocket. You resolve to save it for breakfast, but your resolve wavers when you spot a vendor roasting chestnuts in a metal drum. The sweet smell curls through the air, weaving its way into your senses. You press through the milling crowd and swipe a handful of chestnuts, tucking them into your pocket beside the pamphlet, the flag, and the broken tooth you cracked on that first cannon blast. Bellies full and pockets oddly heavy, you pick your way back toward the narrow lane that leads home. The morning sun has burned away the mist to reveal soot-streaked rooftops and fluttering banners hung from every window. You pass a group of carpenters erecting wooden barriers, a future barricade, or simply scaffolding for repairs. No one seems sure. You shout a quick word of encouragement, and they slap your shoulder with friendly ferocity. By the time you reach your door, the street has quieted slightly. The panic has eased into purpose. The furious tide has receded into determined ripples. You pause to catch your breath, lean against the rough stone lintel, and let the rhythm of marching feet and whispered conversations wash over you. You taste chestnut and apple on your tongue, and for the first time this morning, you feel more than fear. Inside your apartment, the broken lantern still smolders on the windowsill. You shake out your coat and set pamphlets and fabric on the table beside your water jug, empty but for a prayer that someone will refill it soon. You place the small red flag carefully on the windowsill where the dawn light catches the colors in a hopeful glow. Then you slip the apple to the windowsill too, wash it quickly with your sleeve, and bite into it again, savoring the crisp sweetness. Your body aches from the stairs, and the crush of bodies, and the weight of uncertainty, but your spirit feels buoyant. You have navigated cannon, fire, and crowds, found kindness among strangers, sung in a chorus of revolution, and carried symbols of change in your own pockets. You have lived this morning, not merely survived it. You set the apple aside, smooth your hair, and look out at the street below. The day is still young, but your part of it, your personal revolution, has already begun. You rise, ready to meet whatever comes next with the small but steadfast knowledge that even in the chaos of revolutionary France, moments of solidarity and hope can carry you further than fear ever could. You push open the cafe door, and the thin morning light slides across rough-hewn tables scarred by weeks of hurried breakfasts. The air smells of burnt coal and stale flour. You step up to the counter where a single baker's apprentice stands behind a cracked wheel of gnarled wood, her cheeks flushed from the oven's heat. She offers you a leaden square of biscuit the size of a small brick and a chipped tin cup filled with what passes for coffee. You pop the biscuit into your mouth and immediately regret it. The flour is so old it refuses to crumble, and it grinds against your molars with the persistence of sandpaper. You bite down with the edge of a tooth and feel a sharp ping of pain echo through your jaw. A sliver of enamel chips free, and you blink away a spray of cold spit. You swallow the rest of the biscuit in jagged chunks and taste dust, grit, and the faintest hint of rancid barley. The apprentice eyes you with sympathy. She reaches behind the counter for a length of twine and wraps your chipped tooth with a scrap of cloth soaked in vinegar to dull the ache. You try to protest, but your words taste like iron against your sore gums. She nods and passes you the coffee cup. You accept it with grim courtesy, because declining would mean losing your place in the ration line, and in this city a place in line is everything. You lift the cup, and your nose wrinkles at the acrid steam rising from it. The coffee is thin as water and black as coal soot. Its bitter aroma scorches sinuses. You tip it back in one motion, and the liquid slides down your throat with a burn that crawls through your chest like an angry spirit. You cough twice and blink at the apprentice who offers you a small scrap of stale bread to chase the taste. You press your teeth into the bread, so dense it feels like concrete, but it pushes the coffee's bitterness aside for a moment. You wipe your mouth on your sleeve and note the hush that has fallen over the cafe. Outside, the city is alive with distant bells and marching feet, but here, in this cramped room with cracked blue paint peeling from the walls, there is only the hush of hunger and the hum of fear. A murmur passes through the small cluster of patrons waiting their turn. A former shopkeeper whispers that today's bread was baked with half the usual yeast because there is barely enough to make the loaf rise. A retired schoolmaster leans forward and explains that sugar is now a luxury reserved for aristocrats who can still afford to import it. He lifts a wire-rimmed glass half full of coffee grounds at the bottom and toasts the half-smile of solidarity that flickers between strangers. Behind you, two soldiers in mismatched uniforms compare the new decree on bread prices in low voices. One of them rips a corner of his ration biscuit to hand to the other, who frowns at the scrap before popping it into his mouth with a nod of gratitude. You catch his eye and offer him a scrap of your stale bread. He tries not to look relieved, but relief flickers in his eyes before he ducks his head to eat in silence. At the back of the cafe, an old woman shuffles forward with a tin cup of thin gruel. She dips a battered spoon into the grey porridge and slurps it in breaths so soft you almost miss them. When her turn at the counter arrives, the baker's apprentice ladles out a scoop without charge, pressing the woman's fingers in hers for a heartbeat of human warmth. You realize that here, behind these cracked windows, generosity still finds a way to slip through the cracks. You take your place by a narrow window overlooking the street. You balance your tin cup on the sill and watch as the city awakes in fits and starts. A cart laden with rotten potatoes rumbles past its driver, shouting for space. A group of volunteers in red caps hauls empty barrels toward a distant storehouse. Their faces are set with determination rather than despair. You feel a flicker in your chest. If they can haul barrels through the narrow streets before dawn, you can swallow one more bitter mouthful. You lift the coffee again and wince at the sting, but then you sip it slowly, savoring the fierce warmth in your belly. You press the side of the cup to your temple and close your eyes for a moment, imagining the taste of better days. In the hush of the cafe, you hear a faint note of optimism in the old schoolmaster's voice, as he quotes Rousseau on the rights of man, his cracked tone blending with the drip of the coffee pot and the distant rumble of cartwheels. When you finish the last drop, you place the cup upside down on the counter. The apprentice offers you a crumb of dark fruit still clinging to an ancient loaf, an unexpected gift from a grocer who slipped it into her basket last night. You take it grateful for the sweetness that still exists even when everything else tastes like struggle. You pop the crumb into your mouth and let the sugar dissolve across your tongue, like a promise that the revolution is not just hunger and fear, but also solidarity and small victories, one bitter cup at a time. You step out of the cafe, clutching the crumb of fruit loaf like a treasure. The street beyond is still thick with morning fog and the scent of coal smoke hanging low over shuttered shop fronts. You tuck the crust into your coat pocket and set off toward the bakery where the next ration is being handed out. The line runs for half a block and loops back on itself in a twisting coil of people leaning on canes, children clutching empty bowls, and haggard men trading grumbles for polite nods. You fall in step behind an elderly florist who holds a wilted sprig of lavender against her chest. She does not speak, but offers you a faint smile. You return it and watch as she reaches out to steady a weeping child whose mother has collapsed on the pavement. Without a word, she presses the lavender to the child's cheek and wraps an arm around her. The girl stops crying and peers up at the florist with wide eyes. In that silent moment, you feel something shift in the air, a spark of compassion that shines brighter than any lantern in the city. As the line inches forward, you notice the baker's apprentice slip out from behind a wooden cart piled high with ration biscuits, her apron stained with flour and honey. She carries a small basket of husked wheat berries and offers handfuls to those waiting. You press forward to receive your share, and she counts out measure with careful hands. When she reaches you, she pauses, her brows drawn together, then adds an extra spoonful. She winks and disappears back into the early morning fog before you can thank her. The ration table is manned by a pair of soldiers who wore the tricolour cockade but still carry muskets. They have softened from the discipline of drill to the sympathy of shared hunger. One offers you a battered tin measure filled with biscuit crumbs meant for livestock. You lift it to your nose and inhale the grainy aroma. It is not much, but you clasp the tin against your chest and nod in gratitude. Beyond the ration table, a small group of volunteers has come together to organize a communal breakfast. They have borrowed crates from a shuttered tavern and set up makeshift benches around a fire barrel fueled by scraps of wood. A long iron pot simmers with thin vegetable soup. You approach hesitantly, and one of the men, a former mason with broad shoulders and kind eyes, ladles a bowl for you. The soup is watery but warm. You lift the bowl to your lips and taste the faint sweetness of leeks and carrots. You sit on a fallen plank beside a seamstress with rolled-up sleeves, and she offers you a crust of dry bread to dip into the broth. You break it in half, and the soft center yields to the liquid, releasing warmth into your hands and throat. As you eat, you overhear discussion of a shipment of grain that might arrive today from nearby provinces loyal to the new government. There is excitement in their voices, cautious optimism that the crisis may soon ease. Someone whispers that volunteers will escort grain caravans through the city gates, fending off thieves and royalist saboteurs. You imagine standing alongside them, guarding life's essentials instead of scavenging for scraps. The seamstress shares news of a women's cooperative that has begun producing makeshift cloth sacks to replace torn linen bags. They have woven new material from salvaged uniforms and leftover cotton. Each sack is stamped with the slogan of the revolution, a vibrant emblem that stands for unity and endurance. She passes you one of the sacks and shows you how to tie it securely over a shoulder. You feel pride bloom as you adjust the strap and gaze at the bright letters etched on the fabric. Outside the communal breakfast area, the city hums with activity that feels less frantic now that people have paused to share a meal. A group of printers has taken over an abandoned workshop and is printing leaflets in support of farmers' rights. The presses clang in steady rhythm, and volunteers fold the leaflets with nimble fingers before distributing them to passers-by. You take a few copies, skimming the promises of land reform and fair taxation. You tuck them into your coat, imagining how they might tip the balance toward a more just society. Further down the street, a shoemaker and a tailor have pooled their resources to offer mending services for free. The shoemaker patches worn soles on boots, and the tailor replaces torn sleeves in coats. You watch as a young man whose coat is several sizes too, Big tries it on with gratitude shining in his eyes. The tailor shifts, pins and stitches with fluid motion until the coat fits like armor. The young man boasts that he will wear it to work at the docks and never let the rain seep through again. You marvel at how a single bolt of fabric can change someone's day. You press on toward your own corner of the city, your pockets now lined with a handful of grain berries, several leaflets, a cloth sack, and the memory of warm soup in your belly. You pause at a small courtyard where a group of school children practices reading from a chalkboard with revolutionary slogans. They stumble over words but cheer each other on when they succeed. You offer a gentle remark to the teacher, who smiles and hands you a scrap of chalk. You sketch a quick message on the wall, a simple phrase that reads, "Equality for all." The children applaud and clap as you step back, feeling lighter than when you entered. By the time you reach your home, you have carried hope in your bag, solidarity in your heart, and a new sense of purpose. The stale biscuit is gone, eaten in fragments throughout the morning. The thin coffee cup is empty, but you are filled with the knowledge that in the midst of ration lines and fear, communities form alliances that can sustain both body and soul. You set your coat aside, empty your pockets, and step inside ready to face whatever the afternoon brings. For the first time today, you feel that survival is not just about enduring scarcity and bitterness, but about the collective strength found in sharing bread, coffee, and a belief in a better tomorrow. You step onto the uneven cobblestones of Place de la Revolution and immediately sense you have entered a different world. The morning fog clings to the square like a shroud, and the cry of vendors echoes off the tall stone facades. All around you, bodies jostle in every direction. You feel the press of thick coats and rough linen as people crowd toward the scaffold at the far end of the plaza. Ahead, a wooden platform rises 6 feet above the stones. Ropes hang from its sides like the strands of an ugly cradle. The blade's edge gleams with a cruel promise. You swallow and press your shoulders back. Around you, heads lie piled in wicker baskets. Some are wrapped in coarse cloth, others glint in the early light with hair still matted in blood. You taste iron each time you blink. Despite this grim display, life in the square pulses with an unexpected energy. Candle makers shout their wares at passers-by. A boy lifts a tray of flickering candles high above his head and announces an offer of 3 for a single coin. The wax smells faintly of lavender mixed with smoke. You pause to take in the warm glow even before the flame is lit. Nearby, a pamphleteer distributes fresh prints of the new Declaration on Equality. He thrusts them into your hands with an urgent tone and calls out that every citizen has the right to read. You tuck the paper into your coat, grateful for anything to read beyond the guillotine's shadow. You thread between a cluster of wigs piled on a cart that once belonged to a barber. Now the wigs are sold for 5 sous each as cheap souvenirs of fallen nobles. An old soldier snaps up a powdered toupee and perches it on his helmet in a ridiculous display that makes the people around him laugh. You pause to smile before ducking beneath an archway where a seamstress in a bright red cap stitches scraps of fabric into tricolor cockades. She presses one into your hand and tells you that wearing it is both fashion and protection. You pin it to your lapel and feel a spark of pride amid the dread. A group of children passes by carrying small brass horns borrowed from a retired drummer. They blow the horns in broken notes that bounce off nearby walls. Between blasts, they giggle and duck behind market stalls. You find yourself grinning too. Their innocence persists in spite of the terror. A baker leans out of his stall and breaks a crust of fresh bread in 2, handing half to a hungry street dog that wags its tail and licks his fingers in gratitude. You marvel at the kindness alive even here in the maw of revolution. Moving closer to the scaffold, you notice the cobblestones have been hosed off several times to reduce the brown stains. Street cleaners in patched uniforms sweep away the last trickles of blood into iron buckets. Their faces are grim but determined. One of them catches your eye and tips his broom in your direction, as if to say, "We will not let cruelty define us." You nod, feeling solidarity in the shared labor of erasing yesterday's horrors. Vendors hawk pamphlets and food from rough wooden stalls. A fishmonger offers slices of smoked herring laid out on a pewter tray. You resist for now, but watch as a group of watchmen in blue and red uniforms exchange a herring skewer for bread rations. Their laughter rings out as they pass the skewer around. Despite the grind of ration lines and executions, they find moments of camaraderie. You tuck this scene into your memory as proof that community can thrive even under the blade's shadow. Near the scaffold, you encounter a circle of philosophers arguing heatedly over the finer points of law. One carries a battered volume of Rousseau, another scribbles notes on scrap paper. A third woman listens with steel in her gaze before offering a line of her own on human dignity. You linger to catch her words, which cut through the din with clarity and hope. A guard allows you to stand among them for a moment before shooing you onward with a wave of his hand. As you draw closer, you glimpse the condemned standing at the base of the scaffold. Each one looks calm or defiant in turn. A young woman in simple dress lifts her chin and meets the crowd's gaze with steady eyes. A man beside her fidgets and takes a final gulp from a small flask pressed into his hand by a friend. You feel a rush of compassion at their courage and a pang of guilt that you are only an observer. The final stretch of cobbles leads directly under the platform. You pause there and feel the blade's shadow fall across your face before you even reach the scaffold itself. You close your eyes and draw a slow breath. In that breath, you taste fear and resolve mingled together. You steady your nerves by reminding yourself of the small acts of solidarity you have witnessed today. Kind hands pressed into yours. Children's laughter ringing through the square. Stewards cleaning away the blood. You open your eyes and step forward onto the platform's ramp. The crowd parts around you with hushed respect. A vendor passes you a fresh candle for your pamphlet, and you accept it as a tribute to memory and light. In the center of the scaffold, your foot touches the worn wood, and you feel history tremble beneath you. For one heartbeat, you stand in the place of final judgment, and you carry with you the stories of kindness, courage, and community you have collected on your way here. You have threaded through crowds among heads piled in baskets and vendors hawking wares in the shade of execution. You have watched humanity persist in the face of terror. You have felt the weight of the blade before this final step, and now you are here. You step onto the ramp and the crowd parts before you, as though sharing a collective breath. The executioner stands at the top in a simple linen shirt and trousers stained by past duties. His block is worn smooth from countless heads laid to rest. You see the blade glint sunlight like a promise, and you feel time slow. At the center of the platform, the condemned are led forward by two guards. Their faces are pale but resolute. You note the young woman's posture has not wavered since you first saw her. She turns to face the crowd and raises her chin in defiance. The man beside her meets your gaze for a moment and nods. A murmur of respect ripples through the onlookers. A bell rings once, twice, and the air stills. The only sound is the faint rustle of silk and wool as people shift on their feet. A herald calls out their names in measured tones. Their final words are few, but piercing. The woman speaks of justice and the right of every citizen to speak truth to power. Her voice trembles but carries over the plaza. You feel a spark of pride for her courage, even as dread coils in your stomach. When the blade falls, the sound is muffled by the hush, but its impact floods the plaza. A collective exhale ripples through the crowd. Some close their eyes, others turn away. You close your own, and feel the weight of another life, ended for the promise of a new republic. A candle vendor steps forward and offers a lit taper to the guards who place it beside the block in silent tribute. The crowd remains still for a heartbeat that stretches into eternity. Then a single voice calls out "Vive la République," and others join in until the square thrums with cheers of liberty. The stark tableau of death has become a ritual of renewal. You feel the surge of hope and fear mingled in each shout. The baskets of heads are carried away by workers who lift them gently, as if afraid to break the fragile trust that justice has been delivered. A seamstress kneels to wipe blood from the platform's edge with a scrap of linen, then hands the cloth to a curious child as a keepsake of courage. The child holds it like a treasure and tucks it into a pocket. From the edge of the square, a small group of musicians steps forward with tambourines and fifes. They strike up a melody that begins soft and somber, then swells into a march. The notes leap over the crowd and drift toward the buildings, toward those who cannot be here today, but feel its echo in their homes. You find yourself tapping your foot in time, and you sense that music can carry the ideals of the revolution far beyond this plaza. Street sweepers bend to their work, clearing away straw blood and candle wax. Their movements are steady, deliberate, and oddly graceful. You join them for a moment, sweeping broken wicks into a pile and tossing the bundle into a cart. A woman beside you scrawls on a scrap of paper, "Mercy for your help." You smile and nod, and return to your place in the square. As the music fades, the plaza shifts from spectacle back to daily life. Vendors begin to call out their goods once again. The fishmonger offers tilapia skimmed from the Seine. The spice trader displays mounds of pepper and cinnamon borrowed from old warehouses. Even the lantern boy returns with a fresh tray and offers tea tins brimming with herbal blends that promise both comfort and clarity. You purchase a small cloth bag of chamomile and lavender and pay with a single copper coin you found under a bench. The vendor adjusts your bag's drawstring and wishes you calm nerves and quiet sleep. You slip the bag into your coat and breathe in the soothing scent. You realize that even here at the heart of justice and terror, there is room for care and gentleness. A group of volunteers sets up a makeshift table where a local midwife and a barber surgeon offer bandages and herbal poultices to anyone who needs them. You see a soldier clutching his wrist where the musket flint has torn his skin. The surgeon cleans and binds the wound, while the midwife hums an old lullaby taught to her by her mother. A line forms of people offering thanks. You step forward and receive a poultice for the aching tooth that still thunders in your jaw. You place it against your cheek, and the cool herb juice seeps warmth into your nerves. Time moves on. Crowds drift toward bakeries and taverns. You watch as a group of children gather round a chalk artist, drawing a large Republican rooster, and smiling at its bright plumage. You drop a coin in the artist's cup, and he offers you a quick sketch of the scene. You press it into your palm, and know you will carry it home as a memory of both sorrow and renewal. You descend from the scaffold and find the narrow lanes thinner now. The crush of bodies has eased into purposeful flow. You follow the path toward your favorite fountain, which remains empty but serves as a gathering place for discussion. A circle of artisans debates new tax reform. Their voices ring clear with conviction and creativity. You catch a phrase or two about fair wages and public works projects that will employ the poor. Their words fill you with hope that the death you have witnessed will lead to real change. You pause at a butcher's stall where meat is rationed but still offered at half price for volunteers in the National Guard. A butcher with broad shoulders offers you a piece of coarse sausage. You accept gratefully and bite into it, the pungent spices warming your throat. You sip from a second cup of coffee laden with a drop of brandy and feel the first flush of energy since dawn's first blast. You carry your small sack of learned lessons home across the final stretch of cobbles. You recall the courage of the condemned, their final words of justice, the kindness shared by strangers, and the music that rose in defiance of fear. You remember the small acts of service and the banners of hope. You press your hand lightly over your heart and vow that you will carry these moments forward. When you reach your doorstep, you place down the sketch, the herbal poultice, and the cloth bag of lavender. You wash your hands in a pail of cold water and feel the chill strengthen your resolve. You step inside, ready to face whatever comes next, knowing that survival in revolutionary France depends not only on enduring terror, but also on seizing every moment of compassion, solidarity, and hope. You wake before sunrise and stumble out of the lean-to tents into an open field that smells of damp earth and damp wool. The sky is just a pale brush of pink above the horizon. Your fellow recruits rub sleep from their eyes as the bugle crackles across the camp. Waterlogged canvas tents sag under the weight of last night's rain. You tug at the collar of your wool coat and feel the wet scratch of fabric against your skin. Every movement is a reminder that freedom has its price, and this price is discomfort. An officer in a crisp coat and polished boots strides down the line with a leather riding crop tucked under his arm. He stops before you and your comrade and scans your soaked uniforms with a steely gaze. You feel his glare on your damp shoulders as he clears his throat. You stand ramrod straight, arms at your sides, willing your collar to lie flat. He swings the crop toward your boots and announces that today will be an inspection of standards. You swallow and nod, grateful that your bracing cup of weak coffee is already burning off the chill in your chest. You shoulder your musket, its heavy barrel pressing into your shoulder bone. It weighs almost as much as a small rucksack carried by a young child, but you lift it with a grunt and slide your arm into position. The recoil plate feels slick with moisture from the morning dew. Your palms sweat as you struggle to find a firm grip. The man next to you offers a nod of encouragement. His name is Marcel, and he comes from a tiny village in Normandy. His coat is just as wet as yours, but he holds his musket steady, his face calm beneath rain-dampened hair. You learn quickly that courage can be found in the simple act of steadying your breath. The officer calls the first command of the day. Eyes front, arms left. March. The line of soldiers advances in wet boots across the churned-up mud. Your feet sink with each step, sucking at your soles. You hear muffled curses beneath the beat of drums. The man in front of you slips and nearly goes down, but Marcel catches his arm and helps him right himself before the officer sees. You offer a quick smile of thanks. In this place of raw nerves and soaked uniforms, acts of goodwill cut through the cold like a blade. You come to the center of the field, where a series of chalk squares have been drawn on the ground. Rain washes away the lines as soon as they are made, but the sergeant in charge simply redraws them with quick flicks of chalk on a small board. He explains that each square represents the position of a musket squad. The men form up in 3s and 4s, matching their steps to the rhythm of the drum. You count your paces, feel the mud splatter your trousers, and focus on the steady drumbeat. The wet wool stings your neck, but you welcome the ache as a sign of purpose. After an hour of marching in place and stepping forward, backward, and to the side, the sergeant orders the next drill. You and Marcel line up shoulder to shoulder and learn how to present the bayonet for close combat. You thrust the blade forward and hear a satisfying thunk as your tip sinks into the damp earth. Marcel laughs when his bayonet sticks and refuses to budge. He pries it free with exaggerated effort, sending a spray of mud across your coat. You grin as you wipe the spatter from your face. For a moment, the rain and the drills fade into pure camaraderie. The sun briefly peeks through the clouds, sending a warm beam across the assembly. The officer nods at Marcel and you, approving your precision. You feel a rush of pride in that instant, as if you have earned not only the officer's respect, but your own sense of belonging. In the sea of soaked wool and ringing commands, you find something stronger than fear. A clear purpose shared by every man standing in that muddy field. A sudden whistle splits the air and sends the line scrambling into a volley formation. You shoulder your musket with practiced speed that surprises even you. You inhale the cold air deep into your lungs and exhale into the muzzle, clearing the barrel of moisture. You aim at a distant target drawn on a wooden board. The sergeant nods and gives the command. The boom of your musket echoes across the field, and for a moment you see a puff of smoke swirl through the air. When the dust settles, you spot the board and find a fresh hole in the center. Your heart races at the proof of your skill. The sergeant calls applause and sends you back into a circle where medics and armory men wait. A medic presses a steaming cloth to your cheek to chase out the chill. The armorer checks your musket, wiping away grime from the barrel and oiling its mechanisms. You watch as he works with steady hands that have repaired dozens of weapons just like yours. He offers you a thumbs up and slides the musket back into your arms. In that small gesture you feel a sense of readiness settling into your bones. The damp mud glistens underfoot as you head toward a long line of wooden barrels. These hold hot soup and bread rations set aside for the drill's end. A cook stands at the head of the line, ladling out bowls of salted vegetable broth thickened with potatoes and carrots. You accept a bowl and take a sip. The warmth floods your chest and spreads through your limbs like a gentle armor. You break a piece of hard bread against the rim of the barrel and dip it into the soup, feeling its crust soften. The flavors are simple but nourishing. You sit on an overturned crate beside Marcel and other soldiers. Conversation drifts from battle tactics to hometown gossip. You learn that Marcel has a sister training to be a nurse, and that he dreams of building a small house for his parents. You share your own hopes of returning to a quiet life by the river once the fighting ends. The others nod and joke that they too will find their own peace. In their faces you see the same longing that drives you through the drills and the rain. Each of you carries hope that this day's work will bring you closer to that future. The sun emerges more fully now and dries patches of the field. Your wet coat begins to lose its weight. The officer strides back into the center of the group and announces the final exercise. You must form a shield wall for defensive practice. You align your musket butt with your neighbor's shield edge, creating a continuous barricade of wood and steel. The sergeant orders a simulated bayonet charge. You lean into your shield, hold your ground, and feel the collective force of your fellows pressing against the imaginary foe. You push back with a roar, exulting in the unity of purpose that turns individuals into something greater than the sum of their parts. When the exercise ends, the men shout in triumph. The officer allows himself a small smile before ordering the camp to clear the field. You shoulder your musket once more, this time with ease. You pat the side of your wet coat and feel its fibers rubbing away the chill. You realize that in this morning of drills in wet uniforms, you have unearthed something stronger than resistance. You have found solidarity. You have found teamwork. You have found reasons to endure. As you head back toward the tents, Marcel claps you on the shoulder and points toward the rising sun. You follow his gaze to the horizon where streaks of gold cut through the gray clouds. You inhale the scent of damp pine from a nearby woodline and feel the warmth on your skin. You let that warmth carry you forward, knowing that the discipline of this day will shape not only your body but your spirit. And in that spirit, you find the strength to face whatever dawn brings next. The bugle's call cuts through the midday haze, and you snap to attention once more. Your wet coat has begun to stiffen in the stiff breeze, but you do not mind. You shoulder your musket again and fall into the line of soldiers gathered around the drill sergeant. His thick wool coat flaps in the wind, and his boots sink slightly into the muddy ground where rain has pooled. He gives a brisk nod, and you press your heel into the sodden earth to steady yourself. The next exercise is volley fire. You and your comrades form two ranks facing each other 50 paces apart. Each man shoulders his musket, checks his flintlock, and waits for the command. The sergeant's voice rings out clearly. You will fire on my count. 1, 2, 3, fire. On 3, you pour a measure of powder down the barrel, ram the ball with disciplined force, then bring the musket to your shoulder. He counts steadily. 1, 2, 3, and on 3, you fire together. The crack reverberates like thunder across the field. Smoke billows around you and drifts off on the breeze. You blink through the haze and see the target's canvas hanging from a wooden frame, peppered with holes clustering at its center. Pride swells in your chest because your shot is true. Between volleys, the sergeant reminds you to scrape the barrel and swab out moisture. Wet wool and damp metal do not mix. You pass your musket along the line, supporting a comrade struggling with a stiff mechanism, and he muffles a curse before giving you a nod of gratitude. You realize that this ritual of careful maintenance is another form of solidarity. Each man's life depends on the man next to him. Each lock cleaned and each barrel dried adds another brick to the wall of mutual trust. The day's exercises shift to bayonet charges. You fix the blade to the muzzle and lean forward into a crouch. Facing a line of wooden posts wrapped in old blankets, you practice the forward thrust. You push off with your back foot, extend your arm, and drive the bayonet into the target with the controlled force of a carpenter's swing. The posts shudder under the impact. You retrieve your weapon and reset your position. Again and again you thrust. Your arms grow heavy, your legs tremble, but you press on. The sergeant watches for proper form and corrects your elbow position with a shouted instruction. You adjust and try again, bending your knees just so and keeping your blade aligned with your gaze. Soon you no longer see wooden posts. You see the enemy lines advancing. You feel the surge of adrenaline as you imagine repelling their charge. In that moment, you understand how fear can become fuel. You imagine the men behind you trusting your blade to hold the line. You imagine the country beyond the camp relying on your discipline to protect home and hearth. The sun breaks through the cloud cover and casts warm light across the assembled ranks. The wet uniforms begin to lose their chill. The damp that clung to your coat starts to evaporate. You tuck a strand of straw-colored hair behind your ear and savor the sudden comfort. A neighbor claps you on the shoulder and murmurs that morale is high. You nod, feeling hope take root in your chest. The sergeant then orders a quick march around the perimeter of camp. You shoulder your musket once more and match your step to the drum. The field flows beneath your boots, and you feel the unity of hundreds of men moving as one. The mud clings to your gaiters, but you welcome the resistance. It reminds you that each step forward earned. After the march, you are dismissed for a short rest and a bit of midday fare. You head toward a long wooden table under a canvas canopy where a stew simmers in a large iron pot. Volunteers ladle hearty portions of beef broth thickened with turnips and barley into tin bowls. You take a bowl and a chunk of coarse bread. The steam rises into your face, warming your cheeks. You find a barrel stave to sit on and join your comrades. Between small bites of stew and sips of watered wine, you share news from home. One man speaks of his wife's new baby. Another shares word that the local baker has begun giving free biscuits to children. You feel a wave of warmth at these simple stories of life continuing beyond the camp. Replenished, you return to the line for weapons cleaning. Each man has a damp rag and a small tin of oil. You pump the ramrod through the barrel, pull out grit and moisture, then wipe the stock and lock with oil. You finish by wiping your palms on your trousers and checking your uniform buttons. The damp has begun to lift, but stains remain. You pat at them, knowing they will have to suffice until evening. Next comes the endurance march. You and 30 others form a column and set off down the muddy lane that leads through fields toward a rise on the horizon. The ground is heavy underfoot, and your boots squelch with each step. Overhead, a flock of crows wheels in silence against the pale sky. You keep your musket balanced across your shoulder and focus on your breath. Inhale for 3 paces, exhale for 3. You fall into the rhythm. Your throat is dry, but you force yourself to swallow. Ahead, Marcel hums an old folk tune. You join him softly. The song echoes across the fields and turns the march into a procession of hope. At the top of the rise, you pause to survey the horizon. The fields stretch into the distance, patchworks of green and brown. You spot a small farmhouse with smoke rising from its chimney. Somewhere beyond those fields lies the peace you fight for. You rest your musket across your knees and drink from your canteen. Water is cool and clarifies your mind. You pat your uniform's damp shoulders and tell yourself that persistence here will shape a better day for many to come. Refreshed, you fall back into column and retrace your steps toward camp. The slosh of mud underfoot has become a drumbeat of promise rather than a hindrance. Your uniform is still uncomfortable, but each layer feels like armor now. Back at camp, the sergeant allows a brief moment of leisure. You gather near the fire barrel where coals smolder under a stack of split wood. The heat dries the inner seams of your coat. A comrade hands you a small square of cheese wrapped in cloth. You tear off a bite and savor its creamy saltiness. It is humble fare, but you taste comfort and solidarity with every chew. Before the sun sinks, you join a small group offered a chance to write letters home. A lieutenant has set up a makeshift writing station under a tent flap. Crude paper and charcoal are available. You sit on an old barrel and dip your finger in ink. You write a brief note to a friend, telling him that you are well, that you have learned much about discipline and unity, and that you hope to see him soon. You fold the paper and tuck it into a safe pocket. You find a moment of peace in this act of connection to the life you left behind. The final drill of the day is a silent maneuver exercise. You line up as the grey light fades and the torches are lit around the field. The sergeant calls out movements without words, pointing or clapping to signal changes in formation. You pivot without a sound, shift your weapon at a whisper, and lock your shields in perfect alignment. In the torchlight, your uniforms seem to glow. You become part of a living sculpture of purpose and solidarity. Each man moves as one body, each heart pounding in unison. When the exercise ends, the sergeant allows a cheer. You raise your musket, and the sound of voices rises like a song across the camp. The torches flicker, and the damp night air carries the echo of that shout far beyond the muddy field. You replace your musket in the arms rack, pat your coat, and help a comrade adjust his buttons. You feel the warmth in your chest that comes from knowing you are part of something greater than yourself. The drills were hard, the uniforms wet and scratchy, but in those trials you have found strength, camaraderie, and hope. As darkness settles, you head to your lean-to tent. You stoke the embers in the small brazier outside, drape your wet coat over a pole, and lean your musket against the wood wall. You crawl inside onto your straw pallet and listen to the rain tapping on the canvas roof. Your muscles ache, but you feel alive. You close your eyes and remember the day's lessons. Precision in firing, courage in thrusting bayonets, solidarity in shared work and simple meals, unity in silent drills. You allow sleep to claim you, confident that tomorrow you will rise again to face wet uniforms and muddy fields with the same resolve. For each grueling step forward has brought you closer to mastery. Each challenge has knit you tighter to your comrades, and each day's end has proven that even in discomfort, purpose and solidarity can carry you through. You trudge out before dawn into a world turned to sludge by unrelenting rain. The fields around you are churned earth mingled with broken straw and discarded straw hats. Each step pulls at your boots as if the very mud wants to hold you back forever. Your coat is soaked with rain and water pools in every seam. Your bayonet feels like an iron weight pressing into your shoulder blade. Yet you lift your foot again and again, because to stop is not an option. The sky above is a uniform wash of grey that blurs the horizon. Rain falls in steady sheets and drips off your hat into your collar. Your trousers cling to your legs like wet cloth. Your pack, heavy with spare clothes and rations, bobs against your back with every stride. You wonder if there is any comfort left beyond the next footstep. You wonder if you will ever reach tomorrow. And still you march. Around you, your comrades move in formation. Their breath rises in little clouds as they call the cadence. You join in the chant of liberty and equality in soft, low voices. It would be easy to let your mind drift into despair, but the rhythm of shared purpose keeps you upright. You catch sight of Corporal Berthaud 2 paces ahead. His mud-splattered is torn at the elbow. Yet he holds his musket as if it were a feather. When he turns toward you, his eyes meet yours with the simple message we endure. A mile on, you notice Private Laurent slicking his boots with a scrap of cloth. He dips it into a puddle of rainwater and rubs it over the leather. He looks up, smiles, and offers to buff your own boots. You accept the gesture gratefully and find that even this small act of care lifts your spirits. You realize that solidarity is as vital as dry socks. By mid-morning, you reach the edge of a small village. Its thatch roofs sag under the weight of water. A handful of villagers have gathered with an overturned wine barrel repurposed as a trough. They ladle out tepid barley broth for the soldiers. You approach with cupped hands and drink the thin broth in big gulps. It warms you from the inside out. A child presses a scrap of dried cheese into your palm and runs off to play in the mud. You bite into the cheese and taste home, however fleeting. While you pause under a crumbling stone archway, you survey the line of fellow marchers. Their faces are drawn but alive. They wipe rain from their brows and share stories of letters received from home. It takes no more than a shared smile to remind you that this suffering is born together and that the bonds forged in hardship will outlast the mud. You step back onto the road and resume the march. Soon you come upon an old mill whose wheel still turns slowly in the swollen stream. Its wheelhouse offers a sliver of shelter. You duck beneath the eaves and find the miller already sharing his last loaf with a group of musicians on furlough. They pass you a dry wedge of bread and a flask of watered wine. You raise the flask in thanks and drink deeply. The wine tastes faintly of grapes and something sweeter, to hope. In the lull, you listen to the musicians, tune their fiddles and tambourines. They begin a lively tune that cuts through the rain. The notes chase away the grey cold. You find yourself tapping your foot. For a moment, the mud and the water recede into the edges of your vision. You remember why you enlisted. You remember the promise of liberty for all and the dream of a nation reborn. A sudden crack of thunder pulls you back to the present. You gather your pack and shoulder your bayonet again. The musicians cheer and pick up the pace. You march out of the mill yard with new energy. The rain still falls, but it feels softer now, almost cleansing. You You lift your chin and meet each step with renewed determination. Hours later, you crest a low rise and spot the campfires of your regiment flickering through the rain. Your pace quickens. The mud that once sucked at your boots now kicks away behind you. You think of your comrades already resting by the fire and the hot stew waiting in iron pots. You think of the simple luxury of pulling off wet boots and wringing out your coat. As you draw nearer, you hear laughter. A group of soldiers has begun a game of cards by lantern light. Others warm their hands on mugs of stew. You smile at the sight and realize that this march through rain and freezing mud has done more than test your body. It has proven your spirit. You reach the edge of the camp and are greeted by Sergeant Rousseau. He checks your wet coat with a nod and waves you to the fire. You step onto dry ground and feel the warmth seep into your bones. You remove your boots and peel sodden socks from your feet. The stench is foul, but nobody minds. You hang your coat on a rack of wooden stakes and sit down on a bale of straw. A crust of coarse bread is thrust into your hand. You break it apart and dip it into a bowl of hearty stew. You chew slowly, savoring the richness and the reprieve. Against the roar of rain on canvas and the chatter of men, you feel a profound sense of relief. You made it through the worst of the storm and you did not fall behind. You tilt your head back and let the steam from the stew fog your vision for a moment. You think of tomorrow's march and of the next dawn's challenges. You think of the rights you fight for and of the brotherhood you share with every man beside you. In that moment, you understand that survival in this rain-soaked struggle depends not only on boots and bayonets, but also on solidarity, on shared songs, and on the small kindnesses offered in the mud. You finish your meal and cradle the empty bowl against your chest as if it were a trophy. You rise and move toward the tent where fresh blankets await. Your body aches, but your heart is lighter. You step inside the warm canvas fold, wrap yourself in the blankets, and let sleep come gently for the first time in hours. The rain still falls, but now it sounds like a lullaby rather than a threat. You close your eyes and dream not of battlefields, but of sunny fields, clear skies, and the day when this march will end in freedom. You collapse onto a straw pallet as a fever scorches through your veins, your head pounding like a drum, every breath a battle. A comrade kneels beside you and tilts a flask of brandy to your lips, the fire water sliding down your throat with a sting that somehow soothes the ache. He presses a handful of coarse linen rags to the gash on your side where the musket ball tore flesh and muscle, careful but hurried, knowing any delay will let infection set in. There is no surgeon here, only the flicker of candlelight and the murmur of whispered prayers for your survival. The tent smells of sweat, cordite, and damp wool. Canvas walls flap gently as a breeze finds its way inside, carrying with it the distant rumble of cannon and the chant of the assembled troops. A single candle sits on a barrel squashed between your head and the canvas, its glow pooling warm light across the pale faces of the wounded and the weary. The comrade beside you murmurs a prayer to Saint Lazarus, patron of the sick, and pours a tincture of white vinegar over the rag to cleanse the wound. The vinegar hisses as it meets warm flesh, and you grit your teeth instead of crying out. Around you, other soldiers lie on their own pallets, some moaning softly, others staring at the low roof as though seeking escape. A volunteer applies a weak solution of salted water to another man's broken arm, where the bone protrudes, his hands steady, despite the dripping sweat. That man winces, then closes his eyes and breathes in time with the rain that beats leather over the tent. Every so often someone coughs or shifts, the creak of canvas interrupted by quiet cries or the jostle of pots of herbal tea. Your comrade tears another strip of linen from a scrap of uniform and wraps it tight around the wound, knotting it firmly as a makeshift tourniquet. He had learned this from a country barber who once treated a gentleman-turned-rebel supporter with a blade and a prayer. In the absence of proper tools, he uses what he can find, knowing that the pulse in your wrist must be monitored, that the flow of blood must slow without cutting you off completely. You feel his hands tremble when he ties the final knot, but he masks it with resolve. Your fever dreams come on in waves. You taste the smoke from last night's gunfire, see the faces of comrades lost in a dawn skirmish, and recall the warmth of home before you stumbled into this campaign. The candle flickers and almost vanishes, and you grasp for his steady voice beside you, the sound tethering you to the present. You whisper that you see children running through a sunlit field, carrying baskets of fresh bread. He replies that you must hang on for that vision, that dawn will come again and brighter than any candle. A fellow volunteer moves between pallets, carrying a tray of boiled roots and bitter tonic made from wormwood and chamomile. You accept a small bowl, grateful for any neighborly kindness. You sip at the brew and feel a cool, calm flow through your chest, dulling the fever's heat. The volunteer offers a handful of dried herbs yarrow and lavender pressed between rough fingers, and helps you tuck them into your blanket to ease the night's chills. The ration of brandy dwindles, down to a last measure that your comrade pours with ceremony into a tin cup. He holds it to your lips again, and nods, as if to say, "Here is courage in liquid form." You swallow, taste the scorch, and feel the warmth spread through your limbs. You close your eyes and let the brandy chase away the tremors for a moment. Outside the tent, the storm rages on. Rain pans against the canvas in rhythmic thumps that echo the beat of distant drums. A rat scuttles past the entrance, followed by another, both drawn by the scent of open wounds and fresh linens. You feel them pass beneath the pole that props up the tent, and instead of panic, you laugh quietly at the absurdity of life and death, sharing the same shelter. Your wounds throb, the fever pulses in your brow, and yet you feel held by the unspoken bond of those around you. No doctor has seen your name scrawled in his ledger. No surgeon has offered a scalpel or the promise of stitch-by-stitch repair. Instead, you have brandy and vinegar, linens and prayers, fellow souls who refuse to let you slip away in silence. When at last your fever begins to ebb and sleep beckons, your comrade gently tucks the blanket around you and brushes damp hair from your forehead. He says that if you wake, you will see the sunrise paint the sky in orange and gold. Then he extinguishes the candle, leaving you in darkness lit only by the steady rhythm of your own breath and the distant rumble of a revolution that demands more than wounds can claim. You drift off knowing that for the price of a rag soaked in vinegar and a flask of brandy you have been handed a chance to survive until tomorrow's dawn. You push open the door of the crowded cafe and immediately feel the press of bodies against your damp coat. The air is thick with the acrid tang of cheap wine and the smoky glow of oil lamps. Straw covers the floor in patches, where the paint has worn away and steam rises from a pot of watered-down coffee brewing in the corner. You slip through the narrow aisle past tables heaped with empty glasses and fidgeting hands, and find a spot at a rough wooden table where 3 others sit hunched over a tankard. The first face you see belongs to a schoolteacher named Lefebvre. His spectacles are crooked, and his shirt is stained with ink and wine. He speaks with urgent intensity. Today he reads aloud a passage from Rousseau that declares, "Man is born free, yet everywhere he is in chains." Each word lands with a clink against the tin tankard, as if forging a link in an imaginary chain. You lean forward, spooning the last slosh of coffee from your cup and listening as he argues that true liberty comes only when the will of the people replaces the will of monarchs. Beside him sits a seamstress called Mariette. Her hands are rough from years of weaving, but her voice is soft as she counters that liberty without structure devolves into chaos. She traces the words between syllables with a finger as she speaks of social contracts and mutual duties. You watch her eyes flick to the doorway each time it opens, as though she expects the Tuileries guards to burst in and drag you all off for sedition. Yet she presses on, her spirit unbowed. Across the table is Henri, a baker who once served bread to aristocrats before the storming of the Bastille changed everything. He tears a scrap of stale crust from a loaf and uses it to emphasize his point. He says that rights alone will not bake our daily loaf. The ovens must burn, the mills must grind, and the grain must flow freely. He scoops a handful of crumbs into his palm and lets them drop back onto the table, each fragment a reminder that the promise of equality must reach every mouth, or the revolution will starve itself. You settle onto the bench between Mariette and Henri, feeling the unsteady wobble of the table beneath you. You add your own voice to the fray, arguing that a republic cannot stand on words alone. It needs hearts committed to the common good. You quote a line about civic virtue and the pursuit of the general welfare. Each sentence tastes of stale wine and nervous energy, but you speak with conviction because you have come here to be heard. Around you, conversations swirl like smoke. On one side, a pair of young artisans debate the merits of direct democracy versus representative assemblies. On the other side, a trio of former soldiers argue over the proper role of the National Guard. In the center, the cafe's owner, Madame Blanchard, moves between tables carrying a tray of muddy mugs. She smiles ruefully as she refills your tankard and offers a whispered warning to speak carefully. She has heard rumors of spies hired by royalists to report on tavern talk. You thank her with a nod and raise your cup in silent salute. A commotion at the door draws your eyes. Two men in dark coats enter and scan the room. One wears a tricolor cockade but buttoned low on his lapel, as if hiding his allegiance. The other tugs at his collar and brow furrowed, looks older by a decade. Conversations halt as they pass, voices trailing off like colliding lines in a broken song. You feel Mariette tense beside you, and Henri grips his bread knife under the table. Lefebvre straightens his spectacles and pretends to inspect a pamphlet. You do the same. The men pause by your table, as if hesitating, then move on without word. You exhale. Once they vanish into the back room, the table erupts in whispers. You ask whether they were government informants. Henri scoffs and says they were too nervous. Lefebvre suspects they were émigrés in disguise, seeking to fan royalist flames. Mariette shakes her head and worries that every argument here carries the risk of denunciation. You glance at the cafe's low ceiling and imagine a hidden listener overhead, stealing your words before you even utter them. The tankard empties, and the debate pauses. You realize that your throat is parched and that your tongue has grown dry from speaking truths in a cup of lies. A moment later, Madame Blanchard glides back with a fresh mug and places it before you. The wine within trembles slightly. You lift it to your nose and inhale its sharp aroma. You sip slowly, letting the warmth ease the tension in your chest. As the fire of debate rekindles, you shift the focus to the role of education in the new republic. You argue that schools must teach citizens their rights alongside their duties. Lefebvre applauds and leans forward to propose free public lectures in every neighborhood. Mariette adds that literacy must be spread to women and children, not just to men in salons. Henri nods and says that understanding the law is more vital than knowing the price of flour. The conversation flows and ebbs, weaving between philosophy, policy, and practical necessity. Every few minutes someone glances toward the door or at a darkened corner. You feel the weight of suspicion settle like ashes. In revolutionary France, suspicion is the currency of terror. A single whispered rumor can topple a life. You think of those already taken to the conciergerie, voices stilled behind iron doors. A sudden shout from the back room interrupts your thoughts. Footsteps echo on the wooden floor. Madame Blanchard emerges, looking pale. She warns that the local committee of public safety is on its way through the neighborhood to root out counter-revolutionaries. The panic that follows is sudden as dry leaves in a gale. Tables scrape and mugs clatter as patrons push forward. Henri drops his bread and scoops it back up, tucks it beneath his coat, then helps Mariette stash her scraps of notes. You grab Lefebvre's pamphlet and fold it into your pocket. For a moment, the cafe is a flurry of furtive movements. You and your tablemates huddle and press backs against the wall. Mariette presses a finger to her lips and mouths the word silence. Henri extinguishes the oil lamp with a cloth and sets it on a crate behind the counter. You feel your heart thunder in your throat as the boots of the patrol smoke from around the corner. The door swings open, and three men in plain blue coats and scarlet sashes enter. One carries a ledger, another a quill pen. They speak quietly but firmly, asking for names and addresses. You watch as they pause at the counter and question Madame Blanchard. She meets their gaze calmly and recites a list of customers present, careful to omit your group. They note down names and leave without a glance in your direction. When the door closes, the tension remains, but relief washes over you. You slump onto the bench and help relight the lamp. Henri uncovers his bread, Lefebvre retrieves his pamphlet, and Mariette unwraps a scrap of cheese from her pocket. You pass around small bites and settle once more into heated talk about the future of justice, the promise of fraternity, and the need for vigilance against tyranny of any stripe. As the candle burns low, the cafe empties around you. Chairs are stacked, mugs wiped clean, and the straw on the floor swept into corners. You and your companions stand and draw your coats tight against the chill. You step into the damp night. The cobblestones slick with mist. The street lamps cast halos of yellow light on puddles. You share a last tankard at a street stall before parting ways. You leave with Mariette's whispered promise to meet again tomorrow, with Lefebvre's lively debate still echoing in your mind, and with Henri's grin that spoke of feasts to come. The night air tastes of possibility and danger. You pull your collar higher and walk into the dark, each footstep a silent oath to keep the conversation alive, to speak truth with care, and to remember that in a world ruled by suspicion, the greatest weapon is the courage to trust. You slip out into the chill of night. The city's street lamps flickering like dying stars. The rain from earlier has turned the cobblestones into a slick mirror, and you move carefully along the edge of the square where the lanterns hang low on wrought iron brackets. Some are broken, their glass shattered, the light guttering in puddles at your feet. You pull your coat tighter and press against the damp wall, every nerve alive as you prepare to cross into the forbidden hours. Curfew began an hour ago. The law is clear. No one moves after 10 unless summoned by the guard. Yet here you are, heart pounding, because there is information that must travel, a promise that must be kept, a spark of hope that cannot wait for sunrise. You glance down a narrow alley and see movement in the flicker of distant lantern glow. Dragoons patrol in pairs, their boots clattering on stone, their lanterns swinging, their muskets at the ready. You wait, breath caught in your throat, until they pass beyond your hiding place. You step into the alley, past a stack of wooden crates left by a baker who closed shop at dusk. The smell of yeast bread still lingers. You brush your hand against a rough plank, steadying yourself, and move on in 3 quick strides. Your boots make no sound on the mossy stones. A barrel leaks rainwater at the corner, forming a tiny stream that trickles toward a grate. You pause. A man in uniform rounds that same corner ahead, his lantern flame held high. You flatten yourself against the wall and wait, counting the seconds until he vanishes into shadow. Once the dragoon's footsteps fade, you follow the path he left, stepping over broken glass and discarded paper. The alley widens, and you cross a back street where stray cats peer from under carts. One hisses at you, its eyes glowing. You throw it a scrap of stale bread from your pocket, and it darts forward, snatches the morsel, then melts into the dark. You smile at the small kindness, and continue, feeling a flicker of warmth that banishes some of the fear. Ahead you spot a guardhouse under a lamp that still burns bright. 2 sentries are posted at the door, their helmets catching the light. Between them, a wooden door bears a brass plaque embossed with the city crest. You cannot pass through that way. Instead, you turn down a side lane where the lanterns are all extinguished. The darkness presses in. You raise your hand to test the air. It is cold and still. You take a steadying breath, commit the next set of turns to memory, and proceed. You emerge on a deserted courtyard where once dignitaries arrived in carriages. Now its fountain stands empty, its basin cracked. You cross the courtyard in 3 strides, ducking beneath a low window shutter and sliding past a loose shutter that rattles. Metal grates cover the basement window. You squeeze through a gap, brushing your coat sleeve over jagged edges. You drop lightly onto cool earth in a narrow garden beside the governor's mansion. Moonlight filters through the bare branches of a mulberry tree, and you pause to catch your breath. The next stretch takes you along a high wall topped by broken glass shards cemented into the stones to deter climbing. You follow the base of the wall, careful not to brush the sharp edges. A dog barks inside the compound. You freeze. A faint clang sounds as its chain rattles. You stay perfectly still until the clamor dies. The dog growls once, and then is silent. You press on, the wall at your shoulder in freedom, just beyond the next turn. You arrive at a side gate, held shut by a simple wooden latch. You lift it gently and step through into a narrow lane busy with overturned carts of straw. Beyond that, the road forks. You recall the map in your head and take the left fork, past a stable where the horses shift softly in their stalls. Hay drifts to the ground in dusty piles. You step over droppings and past a bucket of water. A stable boy sleeps on a bale in the corner, his head pillowed on his arm. You step quietly around him. On the far side of the stable, you find a broken lantern on the ground. Its brass frame is bent. You heft it and feel its weight, then set it aside. Its fuel is long gone anyway. You press onward into another alley that narrows to little more than a slit between buildings. You crouch low and move, like a shadow. Every stone and splintered board feels familiar as you traverse the hidden routes known only to those who dare to defy the curfew. At last you arrive at the rendezvous point, a boarded-up workshop whose windows have been bricked over. A single beam of moonlight cuts through a gap in the shutters. Behind that beam stands your contact, a clerk named Adrian. He steps forward quietly and presses a bundle of papers into your hand. You catch the edge and tuck it inside your coat. In the faint light you see his pale face, lined with worry and resolve. He nods once, briefly, and slips away down a side street, swallowed by darkness. You pause for a long moment, feeling the weight of your prize and the cost of its retrieval. Outside the city walls, the wind rises, stirring your hair and drying the rain on your shoulders. The curfew is still in force. You must return by dawn or face arrest. You trace your steps backward, moving swiftly, but with care, past the stable, past the garden, past the guardhouse and its flickering lamp. At the base of that lamp, a pair of officers stand smoking pipes, their eyes half closed. You keep to the deep shadow of a shutter and allow them to drift from view before you step forward. The narrow alley beyond echoes with their exhalations. You slip past and keep moving toward the old bridge over the Seine. The river glistens like molten silver. You cross without stopping, mindful of the patrol boat moored midstream. Its crew clangs steel as they reset oars in the dark. On the far bank, you pass beneath an aqueduct whose arches rise into the night sky. The arches shelter you from the wind. A few lanterns hang from stone niches, but most have long since burnt out. You stride past with quick, determined steps, the papers in your coat rubbing against your chest. You feel the promise of dawn ahead, a fragile line between darkness and light. Finally, you reach the safe house on a quiet street. A single candle burns in a second-floor window. You lift your gaze and tap twice on the shutter. It parts silently, and a hand reaches out to draw you in. You slip inside, the door closing behind you with a soft click. You lean against the wall, chest rising and falling as you allow the tension to drain away. Inside the room, you find a small fire in the hearth, a tin of hot chocolate steaming on a table. You step forward and pour a cup, the rich aroma filling your lungs. You hand the papers to the steward who awaits your report. He sinks into a chair and opens the bundle with gentle hands, unrolling the brittle sheets by the light of the fire. You sit across from him and let the warmth seep into your bones. You have slipped past dragoons, avoided patrols, navigated broken lantern-lit alleys, and braved the chill of night. You have carried hope on your back and news in your coat. Now you sit in the glow of embers, safe for a moment, warmed by the knowledge that your risk may change the course of many lives. Outside, the curfew persists, and the city sleeps under guard. But for you, this night has been a testament to courage, cunning, and the resilience of a single determined soul. You enter the mess tent and find the long wooden tables lined with tired faces and empty bowls. A single pot sloshes on a low brazier, its contents steaming into the chilly air. The guard at the door nods at you in weary recognition. You step forward, balancing your empty bowl beneath spout. The cook ladles in a thin broth of boiled turnips and parsnips that have long since lost any sweetness. The roots look flimsy and pale as bones, but you accept your portion without complaint. You move down the line with a staff officer eyeing every man's ration. He stands, arms folded in his muddy greatcoat, his polished boots still gleaming despite the mud. His gaze rests on your bowl, as though he expects you to take too much. You dip your head and hold the bowl closer to the pot, letting the ladle clink lightly against the rim before he moves on. You feel a flicker of relief when the next man steps up. You find a place at a crowded bench beneath the flicker of an oil lamp. Steam fogs the air and drips off the lamp's glass into small pools on the rough wood. You cradle your bowl and inhale the aroma. It smells of damp earth and old vinegar. You bring the soup to your lips and sip. It tastes of stale roots and metal, yet each mouthful is warm and reassuring. You swallow grit and a few stringy strands of badly cooked potato. You grit your teeth and decide that hunger will make it taste almost sweet. Beside you, a soldier offers a chunk of crusty bread. You break off half and dip it into the broth. The bread soaks up the liquid and softens. You chew and feel the dull scrape of hardened crust against your gums. The soldier says that at least it is filling. You nod. You remember how empty your stomach felt this morning. Now it has substance even if the flavor is lacking. You glance around the table. Some men eat with closed eyes, as if tasting memories of better meals. Others stare at the bowl as though it were a distant horizon. You catch the eye of a young recruit 2 benches down. His face is pale beneath the lamplight. He tries to smile when your gaze meets his, but it falters. You want to say that the next meal will be better, that rumors speak of fresh vegetables arriving tomorrow, but the words stick in your throat. Instead, you reach into your greatcoat and offer him the last piece of bread crust at the bottom of your pocket. He nods in silent thanks and tucks it into his pouch. You return your attention to the soup. Beneath the roots you find bits of limp onion and a few floating shards of bacon fat that the cook salvaged from yesterday's rations. You scoop a piece of smoky fat into your mouth and let it melt against your tongue. It leaves a thin film of grease that coats your throat and brings faint warmth to your chest. You close your eyes and imagine a crackling hearth and a stew made with fresh herbs. The taste is a promise you store away for better days. A low crack echoes through the tent as the guard officer drops his bowl and lifts his head. He strides down the aisle with purposeful steps and pauses at each table. His steel-blue eyes flick from face to face. You half expect him to demand more root vegetables for himself. Instead, he says quietly that tomorrow's orders may allow for a ration increase of a single turnip per man. The mood shifts across the room. At least 1 extra root means a few more calories. You tuck this tidbit into your thoughts like a small ember of hope. After the guard moves on, you dip your spoon into the last of the broth. The bowl is nearly empty. You scoop a few drops into your mouth and then set the bowl aside. You push it toward the center of the table so it can be collected for washing. The sloshing metal echoes in the tent. You lift your bowl and wipe it on the sleeve of your coat. It makes a faint scraping sound. You lean back and stretch your shoulders, feeling the tension loosen. As you rise to leave, you see the cook gathering the turnip peels and paring scraps into a bucket. He tosses in the pale debris and slides the bucket into a corner. You wonder if these scraps will be boiled again tomorrow. You thank the cook for the meal, and he offers a curt nod. You step past him and head toward the exit where the night air waits cold and clear. Outside the tent, the moon has broken through the clouds. Its silver light glints on wet cobblestones and lingering puddles. You follow the path to your billet, breathing in the scent of damp wood and distant pines. The meager dinner has filled your stomach and warmed your spirit more than you expected. You think of the extra turnip to come, of the promise in a single root, and you hold that promise close as you walk through the silent camp toward your straw mattress and the quiet hope of tomorrow. You feel the tremor in your boots before you even open your eyes, the distant thunder of musket fire rolling towards you in the grey light of early morning. You throw off your threadbare blanket and step into the chill, the air heavy with gunpowder and fear. Around you, the narrow street lies empty save for the scattered debris of overturned carts and spilled grain, the scent of brandy and sweat lingering in the damp dawn. Without a word, you stoop and grip the first cobblestone, its weight cold in your palms, and lift it free from the road. The street is a ribbon of chaos, broken stones and littered straw forming a rough path from one barricade to the next. You slip behind a low pile of timbers and sacks of flour, where a half-dozen men and women huddle in a loose circle. None of you speak at first, each breath visible in the crisp air, each heartbeat matched by the crack of rifles coming closer now. You drop your cobblestone onto the heap, and roll another into position, the grit of stone scraping raw patches on your palms. It is more than a pile of rock and wood. It is the first line of defense for everything you hold dear. A shout rises from your left as a young factory worker hefts a cartwheel onto the makeshift wall. He is barely more than a boy, his eyes wide but his jaw set. You meet his gaze and nod. He offers a grin that falters when a volley of shots rips through the air and sends splinters from nearby boards flying. You crouch lower and feel the ground tremble again, but you do not flinch. Together, you brace the wheel against the stones, locking it in place with the heft of shared resolve. The distant gunfire grows closer, each report echoing from the buildings that flank the street. Smoke curls through shattered windows and drifts like ghosts above the roofs. You breathe in the acrid haze and feel it burn your throat. A woman beside you, her shawl wrapped tight against the cold, hands you a length of rope. You tie the rope around a stack of barrels, anchoring them to the wall. Every knot you make is a promise to the people behind you. Every pull secures hope against the rising tide of weapons. Above the hum of adrenaline, you hear soft prayers murmured under someone's breath. A baker crosses himself before lifting a heavy chest onto the barricade, the lid rattling with loaves of stale bread inside. He sets the chest down and looks at you, his eyes bright with determination. You place a hand on his shoulder and offer what little encouragement you can. He nods, then rounds on a group of recruits to help him secure the bread against the night's chill. In this moment you see the true strength of your city-ordinary hands, shaping stones into shields, hearts pounding as one. A volley of shots cracks close enough to send a shower of sparks from a fallen lantern. The glass shards and oil drip into the mud, sending tiny flames flickering, then snuffed out almost as quickly. You sharpen your focus and scan the rooftops, the windowsills, anywhere a foe might hide. A young soldier sets his rifle against the barricade and leans in, steadying his aim. You slide forward to his side and whisper the signal for caution, warning him that the guard from the next street is moving into position. He thanks you in a hushed tone, then fires a single shot that cracks off a wooden shutter across the way. The barricade grows under your hands. Bricks from a nearby building pile up beside the fences of wrought iron now twisted into place. Each stone is a story of resistance, of lives entwined in one courageous stand. A teacher kneels to arrange smaller rocks, smoothing the surface so that the wall will hold against the next wave of attackers. You offer him a nod of respect, and he replies with the soft smile that belies the fear in his eyes. In the sweep of that glance, you understand that courage is a shared currency, multiplied when spent together. The wind picks up, and carries with it the scent of wet straw and burning tobacco. You shove a plank into a gap, just as another musket blast sends a shower of wood splinters into the air. A comrade in tattered uniform presses himself against the wall beside you, pressing his back into your arm for support. You feel his breath quicken, and you squeeze his hand in reassurance. He squeezes back, and for a moment the barricade becomes a cradle of solidarity rather than a rampart of war. A sudden lull in gunfire allows you to stand and survey the street. The broken lanterns cast long shadows that dance across the cobblestones. You catch sight of the mayor's carriage, overturned near the fountain, its doors flung open like a wounded animal's maw. Someone has carved the emblem of the revolution into its side with a bayonet. You touch the fresh mark lightly, feeling the wetness of drying blood. It is a symbol of both defiance and sacrifice. You press a small coin into the crack, sealing a pact between past and future, a vow that this city will not fall. Night deepens around you as the barricade takes shape. Lantern light flickers behind the windows of the baker's home turned outpost, and you glimpse faces peering through cracks in the boards. You hear the soft murmurs of children asking questions they are too young to understand. You steel yourself, knowing that the wall holds more than stones. It holds the collective breath of every soul who dreams of dawn in freedom's light. Hours pass in the rhythm of preparation. You dig a shallow trench at the barricade's base to catch the first charge of enemy fire. You stack sandbags behind the barrels and cover ready ammunition in oilcloth to keep it dry. You lay out muskets and bayonets within easy reach of every defender. Each task is both small and immense, a measure of hope carved out of terror. You replenish a bowl of broth, passed around by a volunteer who moves quietly between defenders. The taste of hot liquid warms you better than brandy ever could. Ahead, you hear the rumble of carts heavier than your own burdens. The boots of mounted ox clatter in the distance. You grip your rifle and lean against the wall, bracing yourself for the shape of the coming battle. The first wave of attackers will test your resolve, but you will stand firm because this wall is built of more than stone and wood. It is built of courage, solidarity, hope, and the promise of a better day beyond these dark hours. When the attack comes, it will meet the weight of every hand that set each stone, every mind that planned each reinforcement, every heart that refused to abandon this street. And when dawn breaks, the barricade will still stand, a testament to the faith you carried here, in the company of strangers turned comrades, all breathing as one beneath the same shattered sky. You climb the narrow ladder into the attic, and feel the cold air close around you like a cold sheet. The wooden boards beneath your boots are slick with frost and dust. You step carefully across a tangle of broken floorboards, until you find the pile of straw that serves as tonight's mattress. It sits in the far corner beneath a single low rafter, its yellow fibers damp and matted. You drop your pack with a thud that echoes, then sit down and peel off your wet coat. All around you, the loft is silent, except for the drip of melting snow through cracks in the roof and the distant rumble of cannon that still echoes through the city. You tug off your boots and set them by the ladder. Your toes are numb blue and stiff, and the rough wool socks stick to your skin when you peel them away. You step onto the pile of straw and let yourself collapse backward. The damp rushes through the thin linen of your shirt and chills your spine. You wrap your arms around your chest and pull your knees in close. Your face presses against a cold beam, and you taste the dust of centuries of storage above you. Rats skitter in the rafters and drop to the straw beside you with soft scrapes. You hold perfectly still and watch their eyes glitter in the lamp's weak reflection. They nose at your cloak as if searching for food. You lay a hand on the floor and feel their tiny bodies slide past your fingers. You sigh and let them share this meager shelter. You have no blanket to wrap around you, only your uniform and the damp straw for warmth. Above you, the roof creaks and groans as snow presses its weight onto the tiles. Each groan sounds like a distant footstep drawing closer. You close your eyes and imagine the tiles shifting, then breaking under the weight. You hold your breath until a crack passes and the building settles again. You press your back against the wall to steady yourself and let your eyes follow the single nail protruding from the beam above your head. You stare at that nail as if it holds all your focus and resolve. Your mind drifts to the day that has just ended, the march through mud and rain, the hurried repairs to the barricade, the crackle of gunfire that still rings in your ears, and the thin turnip stew that filled your stomach. You remember the candle-lit tent and the whispered prayers over crude bandages, the hush that fell when the guard briefly passed, and the weight of the papers you slipped past patrols in the dark. It seems like a lifetime ago, and yet only hours have passed. You try to find comfort in the rhythm of your own breathing, each breath a signal that you are still alive. You count the breaths 1, 2, 3, 4, and repeat the cycle until the cadence slows your racing heart. The cold inches under your cloak, and you draw your knees tighter to your chest. You wrap your arms around them like you would hug a friend. You feel the thin linen shift against your skin and taste the salty sweat that you can no longer wash away. A drop of water splats on your cheek and drips into your ear. It is cold as ice, and you twist your head to catch it before it soaks your shirt. You realize that the attic is not just cold, it is freezing, and that every moment you spend here, you lose more warmth than you can hope to regain. You consider climbing back down, but you know that the ladder is outside the guard's curfew zone, and that the risk of patrols is too great. You must endure until dawn. The straw under you shifts as the rats scurry across. You feel a tickle on your ankle and freeze again. A small, scrabbling paw brushes your skin. You hold your breath, afraid to shoo it away lest you wake the sentry below. Instead, you stay perfectly still until the rat moves on, then you release the breath you have been holding and realize your chest feels lighter. You imagine the rat as a comrade, also seeking refuge from the storm outside. Your thoughts wander to home for a moment. You picture the hearth fire in your childhood kitchen, the soft glow of a candle on your parents' faces, the warm loaf of bread baked fresh each morning. You remember laughter at the table, voices joined in song, the comfort of a blanket pulled tight around you as stories were told late into the night. You ache for that warmth and safety, but you also steel yourself against despair. Because even this frozen loft has its own comfort. The knowledge that you are part of something larger than yourself, part of a movement that will bring freedom or fall in the attempt, and that future dawn will be brighter because you endured this night. Your eyelids grow heavy and you drift towards sleep, but the cold steals over you in waves. You startle as your teeth chatter, then close your eyes again and force your arms to relax. You remind yourself that heat comes not only from blankets, but from the fire of purpose within you. You replay in your mind the secret handshake with the clerk, the quiet nods in the cafe, the stolen lullaby of musicians on furlough. Those small acts of kindness are embers that can burn through any chill. You drift again and feel your body loosen. Your breathing evens out. The attic's creaks become a distant lullaby. You dream of the barricade held firm, of banners flying above the city, of citizens standing shoulder to shoulder in the sunrise of liberty. The rats become fireflies guiding you toward that dawn. The dripping roof becomes the patter of celebratory bells. In your dream, you smile and feel warmth in your chest. Then a ray of grey light seeps through a crack in the shutter. You stir and open your eyes. The nail above your head is back in focus. The snow drapes the rooftops with a silent calm. You blink away the remnants of fevered dreams and feel the straw warm beneath your weight in the first direct light of morning. You press your lips together and vow to carry this cold away with you. You rise carefully, your limbs stiff but your spirit bolstered by the promise of sunrise. You gather your coat and slip your boots back on. The attic feels smaller now, its darkness less oppressive. You step toward the ladder and pause for one backward glance at the rat tracks in the straw-tiny footprints of resilience in a night of hardship. You climb down, each rung cold but solid beneath your hands, until you emerge into the dawn's pale light. The city greets you with the soft glow of lanterns, extinguishing the last wisps of night. You take a deep breath of the crisp air and feel the cold transform into clarity. Tonight the straw was your bed, the rafters your shelter, and that single nail the anchor for your courage. Now you face the new day with frozen feet and a fire in your heart. You push forward through the quiet streets. ready to rebuild barricades, defend ideals, and carry your comrades toward the warmth of freedom's promise. You collapse onto the rain-slick street and lean your back against a shattered doorframe. Your hands burn where you gripped the barrel of your musket until the wood splintered. The iron of the barrel is blackened and warped from the heat of repeated discharges. Your pouch lies empty at your feet. You run your tongue over cracked lips that have not tasted bread in 2 days. Each breath is a rasp of raw tissue in your throat. You lift the musket into your arms and stare down its charred length as if it were a broken promise. Your uniform hangs in tatters. The blue coat is streaked with mud and stained with sweat. The brass buttons are dulled beneath layers of grime. You remember the day you donned it fresh from the tailor, full of pride. You wanted to believe in the cause. You wanted to believe that your duty would bring liberty and justice. Now the coat feels like a shroud that marks you as both savior and threat. At every street corner you see faces twisted in fear. The same faces you vowed to protect now watch you with suspicion in their eyes. You rise and stagger forward, each step a testament to your will. The city is quiet now. The barricades lie in ruins. The cannon have fallen silent. Smoke drifts through broken windows and curls around toppled statues of kings and queens. In the square, the guillotine stands as a silent sentinel. Its blade glints in the morning sun. Beneath it, the basket is packed with splintered stakes and wet straw. You can still hear the faint thud of falling heads. You taste copper in your mouth as though you have already drunk blood. Your throat is parched, and you cup your hands in the rusted fountain at the edge of the square. The water is thick with ash and grit. You lift it slowly, as though it might betray you with poison or disease. You swallow the drop and let it slide down your throat. A cold shiver runs through your body. You did not expect to quench your thirst here among the ghosts of yesterday's terror. Yet any water tastes sweet when your body has forgotten the taste of kindness. You push off from the fountain and move down the deserted street. You pass doorways barricaded with chairs and barrels. A torn banner of the revolution flaps in the breeze. The slogan, "Equality, Fraternity," painted in crude letters, is half missing now. You wonder if the words still hold meaning when those who spoke them are hunted by their own comrades. You remember the fervor of the crowds, the surge of hope as red flags rose, the promise that all men would share in the bounty of a new dawn. Now you see hunger carved into every cheek. You see mothers nursing children on doorsteps. You see old men huddled against the walls, clutching rosaries and muttering prayers for mercy. You pass a group of soldiers arguing over the last crust of stale bread. One man holds the crust above his head as though it were a prize. The others press forward, eager to claim it. You hear the snap of musket stocks against wood. You step back, knowing that even your uniform may not protect you from their desperation. You press on, the empty pouch of your waist drawing a hollowness in your chest. You think of home, the smell of fresh bread baking in a hearth warmed by firewood. You think of your family's table, the soft light of candle glow, and the laughter of children running wild in the evening air. You think of fresh clothes and unthreatened sleep. You wanted a republic that would guarantee these basic joys for all. Instead, you find yourself a stranger in a land of broken dreams. You pause at the steps of a church, its doors boarded, and its steeple cracked. You step inside, the floor strewn with debris. The altar is draped in a tattered cloth. The pews are splintered. A statue of the Virgin lies shattered in the dust. You kneel on a broken bench and press your forehead to the cold stone. You close your eyes and pray for mercy, even though you no longer know which God will answer. The silence of the ruined sanctuary feels sacred and profane all at once. You rise and step back into the street. The sun climbs higher but brings no warmth. The wind whips through narrow alleys as though mocking your hope for shelter. Your spirit feels bruised by hunger and suspicion. Every step echoes with the memory of barricades and the clash of steel. You carry a burnt musket that no longer functions. You carry an empty pouch that holds nothing but the echo of your own footsteps. You carry the understanding that ideals can be consumed by the very flames they ignite. You pause before a house with a single shuttered window, the last sign of life, a candle guttering behind the boards. You knock on the door once, no answer. You knock again, louder. Your fist hurts from the blow. You call out for bread or water or sympathy. You hear nothing but your own breath. You step back, defeated, and lower your head. You realize that the revolution devours not only its victims, but its defenders. You gave your loyalty, your sweat, your blood. You gave your belief in a better world. Now you wander among its ruins. Your hoarse voice cracks as you shout a final question into the empty street. What price for human dignity when every neighbor is a suspect, every friend a potential betrayer, and every day a gamble with death? The echo returns to you in hollow laughter. You fold your arms around your chest to hold on to the fragments of hope that still flicker in your heart. You look to the horizon where smoke and fog mingle. You wonder if you will ever see that horizon again free of terror. You step forward once more and lean on your musket like a staff. It is heavy and unwieldy, but it is all you have to stand on. You limp down the avenue where the tricolor flag hangs in tatters from a broken pole. The colors bleed into the gray stone. You brush your thumb across the fabric, feeling the weave of frayed threads beneath your fingers. You remember how it once inspired you to believe that liberty, equality, fraternity could be more than words. Now the motto feels like a ghost's lament. You rise higher on tired legs and look back at the city you fought for. Smoke drifts from the chimneys of burned-out homes. The barricades have fallen. The guillotine still stands, but with no one left to feed its maw. The drum of patrols fades into the distance. You sense that history will remember only the victors. It will forget the faces like yours who dared to hold fast to a dream, even as it turned to ash. Your spirit rattles with the knowledge that you would not last a day in this relentless terror. You would crumble under the weight of hunger, fear, suspicion, and the knowledge that your sacrifice may be forgotten. You would cry out for mercy in the empty streets, only to find that mercy has no place in a world remade by blood and steel. And yet you stand, a witness to the fury of men and the fragility of hope, carrying your burnt musket and empty pouch like worn talismans to remind you that anything was better than this endless terror.